Hello. Do you still have your audio on, Tom?
Oh, no, there's another one. Yeah, give me a sec. Sorry. There it is.
The real reason I usually introduce Tom before bringing him, now teasing. Hello, Tom. And welcome. It's just us chickens. Ain't nobody here but us chickens. How are you, dear? Other than obviously having some technical difficulties.
Oh, it's a real ADD day.
I hadn't noticed, Mr. Put My Butter Side Down Toast.
I woke up at like 8:30 this morning and I couldn't fall back asleep.
Oh, that's terrible. I'm so sorry.
Hey, Megan.
Well, then, can I just say you're doing fantastic, all things considered?
You know, I don't want to say how many hours doom scrolling.
Oh, dear. Then you're doing a wonderful job of hiding it. Tom's here in the chat doing double duty because he knows I like to say it. Hello, Megan. Been brainstorming for a copywriting portfolio project. Very cool. Very cool. And in theory, there may be other people lurking. Hello, lurkers.
Hey, Carrie.
You are welcome to be here.
Hey, Spence.
Hello, Carrie. How are you doing? Hello, Spence. And as per usual, my usual question is, how is the weather in your neck of the woods? Literally loading up my weather app phone. Let's see. It's 65 degrees here. And not a cloud in the sky. Possibly forever. No, I'm kidding. But literally for the next week, there's no precipitation expected at all. Just balmy 80-degree weather for the next week. Yay. Did I mention it's winter? Anyway. Spring is nearly here, though. Hello, cool gamer. How are you? And if anybody wants to mention how their weather is, I would definitely love to hear about it. So, since it is, there.
People so California.
We're both clicking things. Megan says it's 75 degrees here, kind of cloudy, mostly blue skies. Very satisfied. Very nice. Very nice. Versus Spence, it's 32 and sunny. Warming up again, thank goodness. I'm glad the weather's getting better there. We are, that's kind of unusual that we're not expecting any kind of precipitation for the next solid week, like at all.
Well, a meteorologist posted that like there's no storms in the entire U.S. tomorrow. Like, it's all clear. No worries.
So odd.
Wait for April.
Yes, I guess enjoy it while you got it.
Like, I have a sense of like, is this going to be another of those snow Aprils?
It's true. We've had, down here in Mississippi, we've had 2 different April Fool's Day snows in my lifetime. So, you never know. Spence says Tuesday, Wednesday are going to be heckin' stressful, apparently. And it being in the 40s going to make it way more tolerable. Oh, well, I'm glad at least it'll be a bit more tolerable. Carrie says it's been mostly sunny, 37 degrees. It's been up and down lately, so Peanut has sinus sniffles starting again yesterday. I'm sorry. Ooh. I do too. And it's, it is what it is.
Enjoy the poll, everyone.
Oh, Thomas posted a new poll. Let's see. How do you feel about fairy tales in your stories? Love them, if needs must. So boring. What about new tropes? I really like fairy tales, but I like twisted fairy tales, and I blame Rocky and Bullwinkle
Oh God.
I'm so
Those
old.
were so weird.
I am so old. I am blaming Rocky and Bullwinkle, what are syndicated reruns of my childhood. They would play sometimes in the morning.
No. Here's my new way of saying, how old am I? I am old enough that I got a free DVD of Rocky and Bullwinkle cartoons from Papa John's.
Yeah, I don't remember that happening, but I'll take your word for it.
When we were going up the East Coast.
Oh, yeah.
Papa John's had this thing of like, if you order a pizza, you get a free DVD. Choose one of these 3 DVDs. And so our little sis, while I drived, our little sis watched them, and I just listened to these, on my laptop.
Mm-hmm. But yeah, like Rocky and Bullwinkle would sometimes have these twisted fairy tales, but also not just fairy tales. There would be Aesop's tales in there, and it was just all sorts of tales, Grimm's fairy tales, but they would be twisted. There was always a twist ending that was actually funny. Something kind of different, and I loved it. Oh, let me just bop this little bot. There we go. Bye-bye, bot. So I liked it. I blame my love of fairy tales on Rocky and Bullwinkle's Twisted Tales. Hello, CB. CB says it's 42 degrees in her neck of the woods. And Spence says we had a proper winter storm in April of 2020, and it was surprisingly delightful and charming. We leaned into it, made a perfect snowman in the front yard. Oh, that sounds wonderful. Everett is here to remind Tom that we are all so old. Because if Tom is old, Everett, it means you and I, as older people who are older than Tom, are old.
Old as dust.
Megan also got the bot. Thank you. Good job. Yes, let's all get the bot. Good times. Who are you going to call? Ghostbusters. Good job, y'all. CB says temporary relocation day is March 17th. Hope it doesn't snow. I hope it does not snow in your neck of the woods.
As long as you're not moving couches or mattresses.
Because that is how you invite the precipitation gods. Douglas Adams was very clear on this, and he's absolutely right. And in fact, I may have in my younger days tested this theory out, and at least in South Mississippi, it only takes 30 minutes of driving with an uncovered couch or mattress in the back of a truck for it to spontaneously start raining, when again, there was no precipitation predicted. So, Spence says, I watched the new Ghostbusters the first time yesterday. The new one with Paul
Rudd?
Paul Rudd. I want to say Paul Rubin. I'm like, no, that is not the right name, Glory.
I enjoyed it. I thought it was fun.
Yeah, I enjoyed it. Yes. He's here. Got us making sure we got the right names. Removal company's going to move on my first. Well, you know what? That is nice. Because that is where most of my stress comes from, having to move. Is having to do it myself.
I mean, as long as the furniture is covered, in a van or something, yeah, you're fine. It has no interest in rain at all. It wants to save itself for the rain. I mean, for the covered stuff.
Yeah. CB says in theater, in the cinema, it was great. Everett agrees. Ghostbusters Afterlife is a lot of fun. I agree. Getting back from it was not. Oh no, was it a weather issue? Spence says, yeah, it was so cute and good, and I only had one complaint about the whole thing, and it wasn't even a, that's not good. It was a, oh, what a missed opportunity. Agreed.
Yes.
Agreed. I entirely agree.
And this one felt a little bit nicer of, you're bringing in a new age group.
Mm-hmm.
And it's easy to see how you could hand off to one or two characters and continue the series from this point.
Yes. So, just for context for everyone, we are going to be talking in general about kids and family short stories and short films. But we're specifically going to be talking about the ones listed below. Maiden and the Princess, Summon a Fiend, and the Star of Eros. So if you're like, I don't know what y'all are talking about, it's probably because we are referencing one of the short films down below, which of course you can watch anytime. They're on YouTube and they're available for free to watch. And we have selected these out of a lot of family and kids short films to specifically discuss because we wanted to actually get into the meat of it. And we've received a lot of feedback in the past about the movies we would talk about when referencing these type of storytelling and writing styles. People would reference, well, I don't have access to watch that movie. It's not streaming anywhere, or it's not streaming on anything I can watch. And I absolutely
Or I'm in my country.
Or yeah, it's not streaming in my country, which absolutely that is so frustrating. So that is why we are trying out to see what y'all think of doing some regular film discussion, but also some short film discussion. And if we're talking about short films, they are all available in some form on YouTube to watch.
And remember, if you want to go catch up real quick, just go, click on the link in the description and just put it on 1.5 or double time. And that way you can get back here pretty quick because these are all shorts. I believe they're both two of them are under 20 minutes and one of them's 25, 28 minutes.
Star of Eros, I think, is about 25 minutes long. The Maiden and the Princess is about 17, 18 minutes long. And Summon a Fiend, I think, is 12 or 15 minutes long, somewhere in there. So, so that is what we're planning on discussing today. So we're talking about telling family and children's stories in general terms, but we're going to do when we specifically talk about
how it was done in these stories.
Because we have watched enough short films to really see a connection between short story format, and that's under 5,000 words, and short film format, that there's a lot of analogs for those. So we felt like this would be a good way to discuss about short stories, which I'm a huge fan of short story writing. Short story writing allows the writer to practice a lot of really good skills to have, but in a more condensed space. So instead of trying to practice these skills in a novel, which is 50 to 100,000 words and involves an incredible amount of editing, a 1,000 to 5,000 word short story really allows you to practice a lot of working with these tropes and these particular storytelling styles in essentially a much shorter time frame. And also, so here's the thing, maybe it's just me, but as a writer, sometimes I get tired writing and editing, and a novel is just so much work. It's the same story over and over, and I get tired. I just get tired of it, and after a certain time, I'm not quite inspired anymore to work on it. Versus a short story, even writing and editing a short story, the turnaround is so much faster that I tend not to get tired of it or bored with it before I'm done. And that it's nice enough that I feel happy to share it with others before I'm just so tired of these same characters. And this is all they're, it's just more, maybe it's just me. And maybe it's just me and my ADHD. Maybe no one else is experiencing that. And if you don't experience that, I would like to say congratulations. I really wish I was you. So, but because short stories, and I've heard so many other writers, okay, see you later, Carrie. So many other writers talk about how they really worked on their skills, their writing skills, their craft, working in short stories. It really gave me a lot of hope that I could essentially hone my skills with a faster turnaround. And that's, again, why we wanted to encourage everybody else as well. I feel like right now we're living in this age when everyone's like, oh, it's novel or go home. You have to be an author rather than a writer to be legitimate. And it's versus pretty much throughout the 20th century, the 1900s, the short story was king, not the novel. And that was because magazines were so much more popular to read than novels, because they're all filled with short stories and there's a quick turnaround in reading them. And you don't have to make a major commitment. Because what if you're 100 pages into a novel and you realize this isn't going anywhere, or this doesn't appeal to me? You've spent the money and the time on it, versus with the magazines filled with short stories, they were curated. So there was a certain quality level you were assured of because the editors were the ones in charge. So, they were editing for their readers.
Also, you got to share all of these with your friends. I mean, it's kind of like how now we watch the same shows on Netflix or Prime or one of our streaming services, or cable or something, so that we can talk about it with our friends. And with the short stories, you could all trade around the magazines, and you could very quickly read these stories to have something to talk about.
Right. So it had this faster turnaround for reading and then discussing at the weekly bridge games. Or other weekly card games that people played, Pinochle and all of those. That was the at-home entertainment for people throughout the majority of the 1900s. Yes. And magazines, by the way, it was, they still paid a good wage. According to Robert Heinlein, you could pay the rent with one short story a month. And then with the other short story a month, you could pay all the utilities and maybe even some of the groceries. And the third short story a month, if you could write that often, you could have for going on vacation and things. You could make a very nice wage just writing 2 to 4 short stories a month that would get published.
And then resubmitting after 2 or 3 years, whenever the first one that paid you would finish up.
Yeah, ended.
You just cycle the old stories too.
Hey, Laura says, I love writing short stories. Every word counts and you get to move on to other ideas quickly. See, that's what I love about writing short stories. I love it. I also love that about reading short stories, quite honestly. I love reading short stories. I love reading short story anthologies. It is a way that I have gotten introduced to writers that, for whatever the reason, I was kind of hesitant to read. To be perfectly honest, Stephen King is long-winded. And I find that off-putting. As someone with ADHD and dyslexia, I find that off-putting. But there was an anthology, I think it was both science fiction and fantasy anthology book that I came across at a bookstore, and Stephen King was among the authors listed, and I was like, okay, he's written a short story, and I knew the editor. I didn't know, but I was familiar with Mike Resnick. Anyway, Resnick. I think it was Mike Resnick, and I really like his work as an editor. And pretty much if I saw Mike Resnick had edited any anthology, I would just go and buy it, period. No matter, even if it was something I wasn't into, like horror, I would buy it because I really liked his work as an editor. And that was how I ended up reading a short story by Stephen King in his, what is that world he does?
The Dark Tower.
It was in Dark Tower. And y'all, I did not hate it. It was still very Stephen King. It has Stephen King's writing voice, so I got familiar with his writing voice, which was nice.
A lot of description.
And it was, I don't know, there was a nun involved. It was an odd story, but I read the whole thing because I actually enjoyed it. And it gave me a way into this author who, because of other reasons, I had been hesitant to jump in for any of the other stories. So I really liked that. And that's how I've gotten introduced to a lot of other story writers, even Isaac Asimov. Because the way I knew Isaac Asimov before was my mother was reading the Foundation series because Dad asked her to, because Dad did not read fiction. But he wanted to know what happened in the Foundation series. I can't make this up. But if you've ever seen the Foundation series books, they are more like tomes than novels. And again, I don't want to read. I have dyslexia and ADHD. I did not learn to read till I was 9. So, and just because it took me that long doesn't mean like, I mean, I did read a lot after that, but nevertheless, like big books are intimidating and reading is extra exhausting for me. And like physically reading print is extra exhausting for me. And so I was hesitant to read any of Isaac Asimov's stuff, even though everybody talked about like, oh, well, if you're interested in robotic stories, well, you got to read Isaac Asimov. And it's like, but Foundation is so huge. So his anthology series, like he did his own anthologies. He had so many robotic stories as short stories that he would.
For everyone we know, the only person I know who writes quite like Asimov as far as just prolific is CB. Like, just so many stories. It's part of why Asimov, is just because there were so many stories to share.
Yeah. So, like, that is how I got into Asimov. And from Asimov's robotic anthologies, which some of those, by the way, were Foundation stories, but he had written these short stories and put them together in several of these anthologies that my local library system had. That was how I got into Isaac Asimov. Heinlein also would show up in some of the science fiction anthologies. And that was how I got introduced to Heinlein. So later, when I had an opportunity to read other of Heinlein's that appealed to me, I could jump in. But nevertheless, I kind of hesitated for a while because his books also were quite thick, at least the ones that I was looking at. It is a wonderful way for readers who are possibly hesitant about jumping into a writer's bigger, larger works. It is a wonderful way to do it. And it is a wonderful way for writers to hone their craft quickly versus, like when you're doing long form with novels, you're still getting skills. It's just you're getting different kinds of skills that you're working on. So there's nothing wrong with one or the other. It's all good. We appreciate all of it. It's just short stories. I still think that there's a wonderful place for short story writing with writers.
I mean, well, for me, like short stories are the Cliff Notes size version of a novel.
Mm-hmm.
Like you still have all the major elements
Yes.
of a novel. It's just in a shorter form, more succinctly put. We don't have as many of like the side quests and the, we're just going to exist in this world and see what goes on in this world stuff. But you still have the main story.
Mm-hmm.
And so again, you're developing the main aspects you need to in your storytelling that you
Mm-hmm.
would also develop in, long form novel writing.
Mm-hmm.
But you can work on making sure that, like, I put the bones of your storytelling are well developed versus to write a novel, you have to make sure the whole body
Mm-hmm.
is entirely developed.
Yes.
And so it's one definitely helps the other. The other just will take longer to build up the full, XP on.
Agreed. So like you can, get that feeling of accomplishment faster with a short story writing exercise. And in fact, we are going to propose a short story writing exercise in today's episode because we discussed it. And we wanted to actually like suggest people try mimicking some of these story elements in the short story films that we suggest today. Laura says, horror children's media is so amazing. Sure, it may seem campy to adults and super cheesy, but it can set up favorite horror tropes in the kids' souls, give them the strength to push through their own fears, instill fears of what they should avoid in the real world, agree, open their imagination to fantastical and supernatural worlds they can pull from for their own creations. And Spence says, I love writing short stories, especially ones that follow the same characters over and over. Exactly. You don't have to give up on your characters of like, oh, well, we can only see this in a novel. Like, no, you can have them in various short stories, little one-offs. And it's still quite satisfying.
Like, that's what happened with, like, if you like The Little Unicorn, The Last Unicorn, there's a short story he wrote like 2 decades later of what happens afterwards.
Yes.
There's a short story interstitial for Howl's Moving Castle.
Mm-hmm.
To, again, just show you what these characters are doing in between the big stories.
Yes. I like that. So here we are. Shall we talk about The Maiden and the Princess? I'm going to admit to y'all, last night we watched it again so that we could watch it together and then discuss. And it's still, get me in the heart a little, so be warned. It may actually give you feels. You may catch some feelings with it. Spence says, kids media in general is so highly underrated and underappreciated because adults are elitist and dumb. I 1000% agree. I think that what I love, for instance, about Neil Gaiman's writing was, as he's put it many times, I write fairy tales for grown-ups or adults.
Mm-hmm.
And that is actually what got me into Neil Gaiman, was his fairy tales that were really, I wouldn't say they were entirely for adults, but they definitely would appeal to adults as well. Laura says, I sold my flash fiction called Miss Sundew, then expanded it to the middle grade novel Seeds of Doubt. Exploring things in short form can be a great jumping off point. Agreed. It is a wonderful exercise. I cannot suggest it enough. It's so good and useful for writers. Also, it's so much fun. And it is a wonderful way for, when your readers are like, do you have anything new? It's like you can at least go, well, I've got these short stories that I'm working on in between doing novels. If that's what you're into, if you still like writing novels, I still recommend practicing writing short stories as well, even with the same characters.
Okay, that one is feel the shame. Feel that shame.
It is. He's teasing. Yeah, I got into Neil Gaiman through comic books. Specifically, Tom liked the Sandman series.
And then you also had read that one with Terry Pratchett, Good Omens.
Yes. So I owned a comic book shop at one point. And during that time period, I was actively trying to collect all the Sandman novels for Tom, or not novels, graphic novels for Tom, because he liked it. And I had this opportunity because people will bring in their old comic books to resell for store credit. And so the comic book manager knew this, that I was trying to collect all the Sandman for Tom as a gift. And so, but in the process, I would, be working at the store too. And it's not, comic book shops are not busy, say, on Thursday evenings. But around here, you need to have consistent hours in order to have anyone show up ever. And you need to have easy to remember hours, so it can't be tailored to each day.
Oh, no.
So you just got to have, 10 to 7 every day except like Monday or whatever, but like just, and so like Thursday afternoon, evenings I'd work. And I would end up reading the Sandman stuff. The stack that was building in no particular order.
I mean, a lot of Sandman is about storytelling.
And it's also about fairy tales. And Morpheus was in some of these, and Morpheus talks to people in their dreams, sometimes through fairy tales, and other kinds of, well-known tropes, like Aesop's fables and so on. So that was how I got familiar with Neil Gaiman. And then I don't remember, it was either Tom or our little sister or our mother. One of them recommended Good Omens to me. And I read that and loved it. Our whole family, like, it was pretty much one of those books that got passed around. And again, Neil Gaiman was involved with that, as well as Terry Pratchett. And there are some fairy tale elements in Good Omens as well. And in particular, you kind of see that anytime Agnes Nutter is, talking through her prophecies. She is talking in many fairy tale tropes. She is warning people about danger, but in a fairy tale sort of way. Not just that she's warning people, but also the way she's warning them, essentially cryptically or encoded, like fairy tales are, about, you don't just go up to random people and eat their house. Guess what happens? They eat you. Don't eat people's houses, they'll eat you,
And also just the entire storyline with Adam. It's very much, fairy tale style life.
Fairy tale style. Where then the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse are summoned, but of course they're now more modernized. So yeah, it was like fairy tales, but with a twist, which very much appealed to me. So Megan really liked The Ocean at the End of the Lane. Yes. So what with the maiden and the princess, and prepare thyself, we will now spoil it for you.
We gave you all this time to stop and go watch it.
Many days. We gave you many days to watch these. And by the way, down below, there is also a link to the shorts playlist of all the shorts we're going to discuss this entire season. So the next shorts we're going to discuss are horror, and those are listed below today's shorts. There's 3 for each one. And so you can see what's coming up if you want to go ahead and watch those in the meantime. Over the next several weeks, you got your playlist. It's already all there. So anyway, here it goes. The Maiden and the Princess. We start with Emmy in, quote, the real world. She is at school. She is in her school uniform, which very nicely sets up what world we're in. It's very obvious to us. We know what little kids in school uniforms look like. They're on the playground, and she goes, yes, very excited. I'm very happy with the horror ones we picked that you'll see not next week, but the week after is the horror shorts. And they are super fun. But anyway, so Emmy goes and they're playing. The description explains this game a little bit better, but like chase a boy and kiss him. A lot of children's games don't necessarily have a lot of logic behind them. But anyway, Emmy goes and she kisses a girl. And then all the children start teasing her. Emmy kissed a girl. Emmy kissed a girl. So later that day at home, Emmy's parents are very much perplexed, confused, and disturbed. And as a family, and when I say that, I mean her parents decide that Emmy was simply confused and did not mean to kiss a girl. And Emmy sees her parents encouraging her to say this, so she's like, okay, yes, I was confused, even though she really wasn't. And so then we see her up in her room, and she is talking to herself in the mirror, saying, you were just confused. She's coaching herself. And then we go to Hammond. Hammond is at this authority of fairy tales or something, I don't remember. And there are all these people in these gray robes, and they are like, Hammond, you're in trouble. You keep telling the wrong tales. And Hammond's like, give me another chance. I promise I will read the fairy tale correctly this time. And so the head of the board is like, fine, here's this file. And it's Emmy's file. So now we know everybody's going to be involved in this story. So Hammond goes to another room and a microphone where he then is supposed to start telling the story. There is a script of the Maiden and the Prince. And the book drops out of the sky into Emmy's room. And what does a little kid do? And, when they see a book just drop behind them onto their bed, well, of course, you open it and read it. You do not question how physics works.
Thankfully, this is not a Lovecraftian universe.
Right? I mean, I'm just saying, Laura, ideas. Anyway, so Hammond starts telling the story, and Emmy is reading the story as it actively unfolds, both in print and in video for Emmy. Only at a certain point, Hammond can't tell the story as scripted anymore. He just can't bear it. So
he can't tell a story that says she was wrong, that this was bad.
He can't bear to tell her that she is wrong, that she's weird, and that she doesn't fit in. So he changes the story from the maiden kissing the prince to the maiden kissing the princess the prince was also riding a horse with, his sister, I assume. And they kiss, and then Emmy's like, no, it's wrong. And then both Emmy and Hammond are now in the story. And Hammond is dressed fantastically as a fairy godmother. Which, of course, Emmy, being a very polite little girl, asks, she, he, what? And he's like, anything, whatever works is fine.
But Hammond is played by the actor from iZombie, who played the bad guy for the first 2 seasons.
So, and there is Emmy now. She is also in fairy tale appropriate clothing, like more like a pinafore situation. And she's like, the story went wrong. I've ruined it somehow. And he's like, no. They look happy. Everyone's happy except the prince, by the way, who's still nonplussed. And, there's the princess and the maiden going off on the horse together. They seem very happy.
And they also bring this up as well with Hammond, because Hammond is dressed as a fairy godmother. And we even have the maiden ask, essentially, Hammond of, thank you, sir, ma'am? And Hammond responds of, either works.
Either works, fine.
It's fine. This is not, do not.
Let's not get hung up on this one. It's okay. And like Emmy goes and tells the maiden, like, you were just confused. You kissed the wrong person. Which, let me tell you, my heart hurt in that moment. I was like, oh, the feels. No, it's so terrible when children repeat these fallacies as they try desperately to fit in the world their family has told them they must fit in to. But anyway, guess what? Hammond is now in trouble. Hammond tells Emmy to hide under his skirt. And
it is a fairy godmother outfit Hammond's wearing.
I mean, it's fantastic dress, y'all. Like, this dress is
so much crinoline.
Like, look, if you like costumes, I highly recommend you watch this short. And they're transported to Hammond's world, where Hammond has now been called in front of the board because Hammond swore they would tell the story correctly, and then they did not. And they take Hammond's tongue away.
So he cannot tell any more fairy tales.
And they are going to condemn him. And he has no voice because he has no tongue. He does try to speak for himself, but he has no tongue, so nobody can understand him. To which Emmy yells out, that's wrong. Let him at least speak. And to which one of the other board members are like, your shirt spoke, Hammond. So now it's Emmy's turn to speak up for Hammond, just as Hammond was trying to speak up for Emmy.
A bit.
And she says, you should at least give him a chance to speak for himself and explain himself. He deserves the right to defend himself. And so Hammond explains why he went off script. Why he went off script for Emmy. And she's like, it's not wrong to be different. It's okay. Like, she learned what he was trying to point out to her. It's okay to be different. There's a place for you in the world, even when you're not like everybody else. And the board members decide, not unanimously, since the head of the board disagrees, but everyone else decides to give Hammond back, like, let him keep his tongue. And the board then changes their leadership. Hello, Heather. And Hammond and Emmy go off together. And Hammond still offers Emmy an option of, it is possible to change it so that today didn't happen. And you didn't kiss the wrong person. If you want, you could change it. And she decides, you know what? No. I don't want to change anything. Like, she understood of it's okay. It's okay to be different. And it doesn't mean anything. So she's transported back to her world, where she then declares to the sky, it was not a mistake. I kissed the right person. She goes downstairs yelling it to her parents and then kisses her mother. It's like, that was not a mistake either. And goes off, presumably to go live her life. So there is like kind of a play-by-play of the highlights of the story. What we liked about this story. Number one, There's 3 different worlds in this story. There's the real world, there's Hammond's world, and there's the fairy tale world. And it is very obvious, both in the storytelling style and in the descriptions and the visuals, that it's very obviously 3 different worlds. You don't get confused about which world is which. And I thought that was done very well. Also, the fact that it's a fairy tale, but essentially it's again a twisted tale. You could do this with anything. What Tom pointed out he liked about this, and I agree, as well, is there are no magical helpers here. There is no manic pixie girl who only lives to help others and who has no real backstory herself. There is no magical Negro who only lives to help people and then disappears into the mist. Emmy and Hammond are both characters living their lives.
They're both heroes.
They're both heroes, but in their moment, they need someone to speak up for them. And they are that for each other. So neither is a sidekick to the other. They are both heroes for each other. It's so refreshing.
And it's a dual story. It's a great example of how to tell 2 stories that intersect and still develop in their own ways. Like there's a lot of things to really like play with and try your own version of.
So this is a story we'd actually like to suggest as, I hate to use the word assignment, but here, let me, I don't know, prompt you. Writers like prompts, right? Take the basic concept of The Maiden and the Princess. So you're going to need to have a real world character. You're going to need to have a storytelling character, and you'll need to have a fairy tale character. And figure out a fairy tale to then twist. It could be the like Hansel and Gretel one, where maybe instead the kids don't want to eat the witch's house, and they're like, could we just do odd jobs for you and you maybe teach us how to make gingerbread? Since, maybe we need to live in the woods now. And, and there's the real life kid going, you're doing it wrong. You have to eat the house. And they're like, but it's so rude. Like, I don't know, you could just twist. You could take any kind of fairy tale you're familiar with or that you've liked. You have Cinderella's fairy tale. And instead, Cinderella's like, I really don't like parties. I like to walk in the woods and design clothing. I don't know, I'm throwing things out there. And, there's the real life kid going, no, you're doing it wrong. You have to go to the party and you have to wear the outfit and you have to be all sparkling and wonderful. And she's like, I would rather clean the kitchen and design clothing, quite frankly.
I'm not interested in that vapid prince.
Yeah, like maybe I don't want to go get married, whatever. It's not my deal. Or maybe I'm really more interested in princesses, whatever, or maybe I'm myself non-binary and I just want to be me living in the village. Why is this so hard for y'all to understand? But make it a twist, and where the 2 main characters can help each other. And maybe they're just helping each other by speaking up for each other. Maybe that's it. Because, I don't want you to get overwhelmed with, trying to follow the beats of the story. But the story has enough good storytelling style and tropes in it. I'd really like to recommend everybody examine the beats of The Princess and the Maiden and get familiar and try your own hand at, even maybe you don't write the whole thing, but you write out the plot of this. Write the plot as you see it from the short film itself. Then take what you've written and then make it your own twisted version, where you use a different fairy tale, and there's a different situation where your real life kid needs someone to speak up for them. Maybe they just get bullied. People talk over them all the time. Oh gosh, how it gets on my nerves when people over talk a quiet child all the damn time. Just give them a moment to talk. So, and try your hand at this particular style, since it has a pretty good beat system. You can really follow the beats of this story pretty easily. It's very obvious. But there's enough wiggle room that you could play around with what is the fairy tale, what is the kid's problem, and what is the storyteller's problem. Maybe it's just that none of the other storytellers will let them eat at lunch with them. I don't know. And they feel lonely. And they just need they need a real world child to help them go make a friend. I'm just throwing that out there. I'm like literally thinking of that out of my head because I did not have this prepared from last night. But this is the one we'd really like to suggest. You try your hand out yourself, since there's enough different things you could wiggle with that I think all writers would be familiar with. And just try that. If you like the plot that you write, the second plot that you write, if you like it, try writing it out as a short story. Try filling in the plot. Still recommend you keep it below 5,000 words. Heck, for all I know, you can keep it under 1,000 words, which, bravo. But give this a try. And see what you think of it. I would really love to hear from anybody who does try this exercise. And maybe it's going to take you a week to do this exercise. Maybe it's going to take you a month. If you get back to me in a year, I'd still be happy. I would love to hear for anybody who does try out this idea of see what it's like when you write your own version of the beats of this story. See what you think of what you wrote. Heather says, seriously, people need to let kids think before interrupting and answering their questions for them. I agree. CB says, I did something like that, but it's not really based on a fairy tale. It has its roots in real life, and it's rags to riches story. It's called The Burger King Miracle. That sounds great. More of a flash fiction than a short story, actually. But, I mean, flash fiction is up to 1,000 words now, apparently. So, as I said, but give it a try. Give this idea a try where you've got a real world hero, you've got a storytelling kind of fantastical hero, and then you've also got a fairy tale that you twist.
It's a great way to practice having an A and B plot in your story that are both satisfactory and your heroes are equal. It's not a sidekick character that's just, making everything easy so the hero can, have all the glory and be, well known and improve and all the things that come to, the hero in the story. It's two heroes. It's two peers. It's
heroes helping heroes.
And we see how, working as peers works instead of it always being this top-down, authoritarian stories.
Yes. So this was the one that I felt like this would actually be a very fun way for writers to practice these kind of stories that are kind of fairy tale based, but also aimed at a younger crowd. Does your story need to be aimed at a younger crowd? No. If you just want to write it for yourself and thinking it's for adults, that's great. It's fine. Even if you're writing it for children, you do not need to dumb down the vocabulary. At least till your very last edit. I mean, granted, if you are like, this is for 6-year-olds and you've got a whole bunch of 12-letter words, you may need to at least provide context within context clues. You remember? Does everybody remember in school the whole context clues? If you don't understand a word, look for the context. You may need to provide some context clues, but nevertheless, this is the one that we were like, this would actually be very fun for a lot of writers to practice a short story following these similar beats. Not exactly copying, but nevertheless, because this is how you learn from masters. Okay. When we talk about with painters, the way painters learn how to paint well is they are actually assigned to paint masterpieces and paint them like the masters, which means practicing the same brushstrokes. Some painters have gotten into some trouble later with forgeries, but that's a whole nother issue. Now with writing,
that's why we know what the Mona Lisa looked like originally, because everyone who studied under Da Vinci, I think,
I believe so,
had to paint their own version of the Mona Lisa.
Yes. It was a requirement to be his apprentice or for them to learn from him was you had to copy it and paint it, try to practice his brushstrokes on.
And the difference being that when they did it, then they would simply seal it like every painter at the time did, and when this wash, and that stuff's easy enough to remove, versus Da Vinci kept fiddling with this thing over 20 or 40 years, I forget how long, and kept adding little bits of brush strokes and stuff and never sealed it.
Mm-hmm.
So the actual original would be very difficult to restore, but all these copies that his apprentices made, it's easy to fix and restore with modern tech.
Because they sealed it.
So you can see like what the colors are supposed to be, the shades and everything.
So this is the writing version of this where you're not, trying to exactly write, copying down someone else's story does not help writers practice writing. But instead, you take a story with very easy to follow beats. You write out the outline. And then you make a new outline that has your own twists in it. So maybe, you change the main characters and you make them different. You obviously give them different names, but you also make their kind of personalities different, their descriptions different. And then you give their problem, you have a different problem from it, but you're following the beats of another writer. That is how writers practice good writing skills. So that's what I wanted to also do, was like really offer that option. Since this one looked like it'd be very easy and straightforward for writers. If anybody has any questions now or later, and yes, even a month later, if you have questions about this, please let me know. If you are rewatching this later, you can just put in the comments if you don't know other ways to contact me, although my contact stuff is in the doobie-doobie below. But I would be happy to help anybody who has further questions about how to do this, how to copy the beats down, and then do their own version of this short story. I'd be happy to help anybody who has further questions or who just needs to vent. But anyhow, so what we're going to do is we're going to do a 10-minute little bio break. And then when we come back, did you have anything else you wanted to talk about in the Maiden and the Princess, Tom?
No, I think you covered most of it.
Well,
the beats, the part I do like is the beats for this. Of all of them, it's very obvious every time a beat happens in this story. Mm-hmm. Like they make it, like unlike a lot, they make it very obvious when when the next part of the story starts happening. Like it'll be a big visual. So it is a lot easier than a lot of other stories to really copy down and like, here's the beat. Here, every time something changes, note it down. There's not a lot of question. If did I miss a beat somewhere? No, you'll notice. You'll notice every time there's a beat change. They make it very obvious.
Yes. So, and when we come back, we will talk about Summoned a Fiend. Yes. So, when we come back, we'll talk about anything we remembered over the break that we wanted to still mention about Maiden and the Princess, and then we'll move on to Summon a Fiend. So, and I'm just throwing this out there, maybe now would be a lovely time to get something to drink and watch Summon a Fiend if you haven't already. And when we come back, we will talk about Summon a Fiend.
Oh, and the poll finished. And most people do like fairy tales in their stories. They are comforting. They are tropes we know. They give us something to expect. Again, a story that people enjoy is a story that has expectations that are fulfilled.
Yes, I agree. So again, just mentioning, now would be a lovely time to make sure you have something to drink or start making that tea, and we'll see you back here in approximately 10 minutes. go to the bathroom. Meepity beep. Meepity beep. Meepity beep beep beep. Come out wherever you are. Hello, Tim.
Hello.
Did everybody enjoy my announcement? That I did not mean to yell to everybody. Turned out my computer is having a delay and lied to me, telling me my mic was off and then once I look away, turned itself back on. Anyway, we only have one bathroom in this house, so one must make an announcement in case negotiations have to start of who gets to go first. So anyway, so there is a new poll. How are we doing? Does every fictional library have an occult section? Should kids be allowed to check out those books? The options are yes, 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 no, no, yes, no, no. Hope it's not confusing. Mostly, it looks like we only have people voting yes, yes. Every fictional library does have an occult section. And yes, kids should be allowed to check out these books. The only other votes are, does every fictional library have an occult section? No. Should kids be allowed to check out these books? Yes. Spence says the occult section, according to the Dewey Decimal System, is like 0 to 100 portion, though at least a significant part of that is always going to be Christian cash grab books, which I feel like is a highly under-referenced thing in fictional occult sections. It makes for lots of giggles. Tom says, I can just imagine the story where one of those cash grab books references actual spells and allows some innocent kid to cast some real spells and all hell breaks loose. Spence says, that is the thing that is going to happen to my ghost-busting characters in my short story series, OMG. Inez and their girlfriend are going to try doing some research at the people eating library, and teenage doom shenanigans ensue. Kat has her hat and gloves on. Excellent. Oh, Tom has put up the banner to remind me that if you are having a good time, and we hope you are, please feel free to share with others, share this video with others, click like, subscribe, ring the notification bell, all the good things. Also, we do have memberships available starting for as low as 99 cents a month, where we give you all the awesome emotes that YouTube will allow. The absolute maximum allowable awesome emotes is available. Also, if anybody has suggestions about membership benefits, please let me know, because quite frankly, I have no idea what I am doing. I'm just out here in the streets trying to teach myself how to be a YouTuber. I didn't know this was going to happen to me. Please share, like, and subscribe, and give us your comments, y'all. Tom has updated it. Megan says, people eating library, a phrase I never thought I would hear before. I mean, libraries will eat people. Spence says, join the membership club. And all the wonderful emotes. Look at the cuteness. Yes, I have new emotes. And the more members we have, the more emotes YouTube will allow me to upload. And yes, we do have cake. May I interest you all in cake, which you can use on other YouTube live streams, by the way, and comments. That is one of the really cool things about the memberships, is you can use the emotes anywhere. So I like that. So, anywho, here we are back.
Mm-hmm. Let's talk about one of the cutest little girls.
Hazel. Hazel is awesome. Hazel and Summon a Fiend.
Like, I don't care whether her accent, speech impediment is real or faked.
She
I
is
don't care.
super adorable.
It's just adorable.
She's so cute. And she is so brave. But she would rather go to the occult section of her local public library and summoned what she thinks it says summon a friend. She would rather summon a friend than make a friend at the library. Hazel has been through a lot. Okay, so here it is. Get ready for me to tell you the whole story. Hazel lives with her dad, and he is apparently a writer. They don't really discuss it in the story, but it's in the description that is what he, I gather, is doing. He's writing things down at the library, and she is there with him. And she wants to make friends, but she doesn't know how. And he's like, just go up to people. It's uncomfortable for 5 seconds. It's fine. But she can't bear it. So she goes to the occult section of the library instead of to the coloring tables and finds this book looks older than the town. Props to the prop department. They are. Mwah. And she takes this book home where she does what the book tells her, and she summons a Duke of Hell, Dandelion.
I mean, let's give props to an 8-year-old for successfully completing this spell.
She did a great job, okay? Let me tell you, a lot of adults can't follow directions. And Hazel followed all the directions in how to summon a fiend, which she misread. So Dandelion, the Duke of Hell, shows up and is very disappointed that there is this child here. And she's like, will you be my friend? He's like, no. And, this becomes, it's sort of the idea of enemies to friends trope. He really wants to be freed of her summoning, but she is demanding friendship.
Which is really embarrassing for a Duke.
The Duke of Hell. You can tell Dandelion doesn't really have a lot of people skills. So he's like, well, if I find you another friend, can I go? She's like, okay, let's give it a try. And he immediately transports them to a playground full of children while children are playing. And this causes a lot of children to run screaming from the playground. So already we're not doing great in this goal. And she is very disappointed. Oh, I forgot to mention. So before they go to the park, she is playing tea with Dandelion as they go over, I don't know, some sort of treaty. I don't remember. And the father comes in and is like, hey, did your new friend, where's your new friend? Is your new friend imaginary? And she's like, no, it's real. Dandelion is hiding. And her father offers to get pizza. And they have she and Dandelion have a whole discussion about why did you hide? Now my father thinks I'm a liar. So then they go to the park, and then all the hell ensues. And at some point, as Hazel is moping, Dandelion finds a child and threatens him if he is not Hazel's friend. But Hazel very quickly picks up on this. And the little boy, Kyle, is like, please, my little, I think it's a puppy or a kitten.
Yes, threatened to hurt my puppy.
Please, but she is too good for this world. Like,
she's too cute to be hurt. Don't.
Yes, and Hazel's like, you can go, Kyle. To which then Hazel and Dandelion have a fight. They actually have an argument about they're at conflict. Dandelion wants to go. Dandelion does not want to be friends with anybody. Hazel really wants a friend and is obviously very lonely. They come to sort of, what is it? I can't remember what it's actually called in the writing world, but they come to sort of a peaceful place, but not necessarily a resolution yet. And as they are trying to figure out how to find a resolution to this.
Well, they also, in that point, Dandelion realizes that he has kind of developed some feelings for her.
Dandelion has caught feelings, y'all.
Even though at the same time, he does not want to be here. He does not want to be around her. But he does suddenly realize he does care about this person. So, okay, how can they really resolve this problem?
So Dandelion then tries to dress up as a normal human, and this does not work. He looks like Creeptastic. In fact, he looks somewhat similar to the character I put on the thumbnail for today's show, where who knows, we may have people pop in to say their thoughts about writing. Yes, they're at an impasse, a pathetic Princess Bride reference. And so he dresses up incognito. And they go to the library where he essentially coaches her and tries to encourage her to go introduce herself in the coloring table. Because she thinks she's not brave. And he's like, you're very brave. I mean, they've gotten into a couple different disagreements and she's not backed down once to him. I imagine he's not used to that as a Duke of Hell. This is not normal for him. And so we see she is actually quite brave, but she doesn't have that confidence. And he's like, you can do it. Go do it. She goes up to another kid and is like, hi, can I color with you? And the little girl's like, yes, here, let me get you set up. And they actually know each other. They share a class together. And that is where the little girl's asking, the little girl's talking about herself. She wants to be an artist when she grows up, just like her mom. And she's like, what did your mom do? And Hazel's like, my mom is dead. And, they talk about that. And that's where we find out, where is Hazel's mom? Hazel's mom is nowhere. Hazel is dealing with, a family that is struggling. And then we next see the same little girl who was coloring with Hazel in Hazel's room playing Tea Party. And where the father then shows up again and is like, hey, I'm ordering pizza. Is everybody ready for pizza? Because this man only has one thing he does. He orders pizza and apparently he writes. He's not doing well either. And
early we did hear like he doesn't have any friends right now either.
Yeah, Hazel pointed out he doesn't have friends. So the world has gotten very small. And Hazel's father and Hazel's new friend go off for pizza. And Hazel hangs behind because Dandelion is hanging behind. The little girl, the guest little girl, did not see Dandelion. And that is where he's like, can I please leave now? She's okay. Are you ever going to come back? Of course. Are you lying to me? Maybe. Where they essentially say their goodbyes and their hugs. Oh my God, y'all, the hug. The casting in this short is so good. They have such good chemistry. What I really took from this is there's dialogue-wise, there's not actually a whole lot of dialogue in this film. And yet, we do not need a lot of dialogue to understand all of these main characters. So we understand the father. We learn very quickly he's not necessarily very good with people. He doesn't have friends of his own, according to Hazel, and he agrees. And the man apparently does not cook. He only orders pizza. This little girl is going to grow up and be like, pizza is the flavor of sadness. We see Hazel, a little, an 8-year-old girl, because they do mention her age at some point. A little 8-year-old girl who is struggling to have friends. She doesn't have any friends anymore, or at least she doesn't feel like she does. And she is struggling to reach out in the world, but she is trying to. She just doesn't have the skills she needs. And the one adult around her also apparently does not have the skills to help her. And then Dandelion, a fantastical creature, who also does not have people skills, but who is in his own way trying his best to help her. Interestingly enough, we really do not go into the backstory of any of these three characters very much, and yet we learn quite a bit about them through their limited dialogue with each other. And so I would like to point out, watching this, you can really see how you don't have to have a tremendous amount of world building to have a fantastical story.
And that you can infer a lot from their behaviors. Like, you can infer a lot about how Dandelion runs his duchy in hell with the way he, attempts things in this world.
Mm-hmm.
Of like, obviously he's someone in charge and he's not used to hearing people tell him no, because he always does things expecting people to just fall in line.
Mm-hmm.
Like, we can infer a lot just because of his behaviors. He doesn't actually have to say what he does or any real story of what he was, taken out in the middle of in hell when he was summoned or anything. We just see it in his behaviors.
Yeah, he doesn't really talk about what he was doing, what's going on in his life, what they need him to go do back home. We do not see any of that. He does not talk about any of it. And I'd like to point out, you really don't need that. So, pretty much in this story, we, I believe, only have 3 locations. And we go back and forth between them. We have, technically, we have Hazel's house, but really we only see her bedroom. We have the public library, and it looks like a very small library, quite honestly. It looks like a community or a neighborhood library. And then we have the playground. That's it. So what I would recommend for this, if what you would prefer to practice storytelling is this style of story, as it is very simple too, is I do recommend sketching out a very general floor plan for each of these locations. Your main character's room, public library, and a playground. And again, playgrounds are not necessarily that complicated, although if you want to put one of those cool, like, neat. It's your choice. Your child character needs to have a problem that has a reasonable solution. Whether we're talking about bullying or needing a friend or somewhere to go to do something. Anything.
Confidence.
Something that you know how to solve. You as the writer are familiar enough with this, you know how to solve. Maybe your child character wants to learn a new hobby. Or needs reading tutoring. And needs to find a tutor that they like. Because
or
not all tutors, maybe a babysitter. Not all tutors are created equal, y'all. So, or they need to find their own babysitter because they, their dad needs to go out and have a life. I don't know. The child has a relatively easy to solve problem that you as the writer know how to solve, and that someone else can help that character solve. Then you're going to pull in another character. Again, if you don't like fantasy or cosmic horror, you do not have to pull in a demon from hell. You could reasonably just pull in a babysitter and just have it be just a contemporary story.
Or you could have them already have a peer friend who then helps guide them on how to find what they're actually looking for.
There's no need to summon anybody. And then you need to have them go about finding this solution. But then they have to part. Why do they have to part? So what we often see is a ticking time bomb, is what they call it, or the clock, running out the clock. So the other person that is there to help has a limited amount of time. Maybe they're about to move. Maybe they have to get back to their job in hell. Maybe they have to go get a real job. I don't know. Go work in retail hell. I'm just throwing it out there. They have a limited time that they can be of service to our main character. And it is very clear from the start, there is a clock to run out. So you would need to establish that like in that first to second scene where your two characters are talking. You need to establish that within the first or second scene, that essentially the second character is running out the clock. That at a certain point they have to leave. So there is a limited amount of time to solve this problem, so that both characters are sufficiently motivated to participate in solving the problem rather than one character doesn't really want to solve it because it means the two will have to part. You can run that trope too. It's just a little bit more complicated. I was trying to make it as simple as possible. But either way, give this one a try if this appeals to you more than trying to write a version following the beats of The Princess and the Maiden. Or The Maiden and the Princess, whatever. People. So, Tom, what do you have to say about this story?
I am fascinated by how much information is sort of inferred and then just directly slipped in without really having to do an info dump or anything. You know, you kind of wonder where is Hazel's mom, and then we later on towards the end have, the other, little girl actually just ask, what's your mom? And that's where we find out. And that is where a lot of the questions and mysteries of this story fall into place.
Mm-hmm.
Why is Hazel's dad not doing the job that Dandelion does of encouraging her, giving her a pep talk, giving her some little ideas to help her on this initial step to find a friend? And it's because he's in mourning. He's still just ordering pizza. He has not yet gotten the skills that obviously his wife was the one that handled the food. So we can kind of infer a lot of things like how long ago did their mom pass away? Probably not more than 6 months ago.
Yeah, I would guess like 2 to 3 months, honestly.
Of the dad's in his own little world dealing both mourning and trying to keep a job. But we don't have to go into that. It's great
none of that's necessary.
Yeah. Again, it's great at showing where the details are needed and where you don't need to put them in there. We don't need to hear Dandelion's backstory.
Mm-hmm.
We can infer that from Dandelion's behavior. And that it doesn't have to be a big problem. We can tell a very compelling story about a very small problem. And, try not to catch feels watching this one.
It's hard. Oh my God. I'm like, who's cutting onions? There's onion ninjas in the room.
But it's how little you actually have to do. Again, you don't need a lot of dialogue. I mean, the most dialogue we really have in a scene is the argument. And for good reason. But it's not a instant resolution. But again, we infer some knowledge because we notice Dandelion suddenly switching after he says the wrong thing. He realizes right after it comes out of his mouth, oh, I should not have said that. That was not the right thing. I need to fix that now. But he's a Duke, so he's not going to directly apologize.
He's a demon. They don't.
Yeah. It's definitely one of the better showcases of you only need to say what is different about this world.
Mm-hmm.
You only need to have the characters mention what's not the norm. Your watchers, your readers will assume everything else is just like in our world. Even if it is, really, that librarian let her check out that book?
As a librarian, we do not censor what is available to children accounts versus adult accounts. That is the job of the child's parents or caregivers, not the librarians.
Who's obviously not paying much attention.
I'm just like, what is up with all these California libraries with occult sections? Like Jennifer's Body and Buffy Vampire Slayer, both the movie and the TV show. What is up with the occult section in these libraries? Why are these books older than the state of California? I'm just saying.
Yeah, that's what I really liked about this one was it's a really good showcase of the classic phrase of show don't tell. And and also showing how much you don't need to tell. your watchers, your readers can follow along just as easily.
One of the things I've noticed with many less experienced writers is what I think of as overworld building. It is not necessary to build out your world building to that whole globe for, say, a story like this. It is unnecessary. And certainly, even if you have built it out and you say you're just trying to plunk down and write a short story in a much larger world building you've already done, you don't need to talk about all of that. And if anything, it's a distraction to the reader or to the consumer of your story. It's a distraction. It's not really necessary to the storytelling. So this is what I suggest, is to try practicing short stories with minimal world building, at least that's mentioned in your story. Because it's partly what I want people to see of, I hear so many people feeling intimidated about world building because, they've seen other people talk about how, like, here's my world building Bible and and all this. And then those are cool. Those are wonderful and they can be super fun. But when you already know the story you want to tell, just jump in and tell it. And do not worry about, but I don't have time to build all this work. Why don't you first tell the story and then figure out what extra world building, if any, you need to do? Because I would like to point out, in this story, there are so many parts of the world building they don't even mention. They don't mention the name of the pizza place. They don't mention anything about Dandelion's job in hell. They don't mention even the name of the library. They don't mention the name of the school these two girls go to. They don't mention any librarian name. There are so many things they don't bring up.
We don't even know what her living situation is.
Yeah, we don't know. Is this a rental? Is this a house? We have no idea. And
is it an apartment complex?
No idea. It's not important. We don't know the name of the park. We don't know where the park is located relative to Hazel's house. For all we know, it's down at the corner. Or it's attached to the school or something. We have no freaking clue. And it is not necessary for you to put in any of this at all, ever. Because, yes, as Spence points out, readers love to fill in the blanks for themselves as long as they're still getting a good story and having a good time. So that is what I propose, is that world building is not necessary. The part that is necessary is go ahead and sketch out the plot, the layout of the park. Where's the bench relative to the monkey bars or the slide or the swing set? Look, is it a park if it has no swings? I have salty opinions. And I'm sure you do too. And you're like, it's fine without swings, but you have to have a slide. Whatever your opinions are, you put that in. And the layout of Hazel's room, maybe, relative to the hallway and the living room. Or at least the front door where the pizza comes in, or the side door if you're Southern. Because, fun fact, a lot of people don't realize this outside the South. In the South, for some reason, nobody uses the front door. Everybody uses the side or back door. And pizza delivery people have learned this the hard way. You have to walk around people's junky cars that are literally up on blocks in the driveway to go deliver pizza to the side door through the kitchen. But that's how it is in the Deep South. So, nevertheless, write out the plot of literally the layout of the facilities where your characters are going to go so that your descriptions are correct. Readers will notice when one time the dad's going to Hazel's room and takes a left, and the next time when he goes the second time to tell the girls who are having a tea party, I ordered pizza and it's here, that he turns right instead. They will notice that, and that is why you need a physical layout. But beyond that, you really don't need a whole lot of world building. I mean, Dandelion needs a name. However, for instance, in The Maiden and the Princess, we actually only know a few of the board members' names. We don't know all their names, and it is not necessary to list them all by name And it is a distraction if it is not part of the actual story, like the dialogue, or Hammond then looked at Wordsworth. I don't know.
Versus, like, we do know that Hazel likes princess games and pretend, whatever you want to call it, in part because she's got a crown in her room from the get-go that she periodically wears. Like, she likes to do royal high tea, which we then see with Dandelion, and then, her friend, when the friend has a sleepover with her, and her friend also has her own little crown, showing, like, how much, no, this is part of Hazel's real play. This is what she is most interested in. And it does, give us a few more clues about her and probably what she used to do with her mom. Of, like, again, she is looking for someone to substitute that playtime she had before.
Yes.
But we don't have to hear all that stuff. We can just simply see it referenced and infer the rest.
We don't need the father to mention, oh, it's so nice you're playing Tea Party again like you used to with your mom. Like, he could say it, but he doesn't, and it's not necessary. You can have your character say these things. And it's not the end of the world to have them say.
To give it to, show this, we instead have that moment where he says, I want to say girls or ladies or something, and Hazel harumphs at him. And he goes, oh, sorry, your majesties. Because he is familiar with this play. He knows how Hazel likes to play with tea time. And who she's, going as, of, like, she likes to, do tea time and do treaties between kingdoms. Which, again, felt very familiar from my childhood.
What are you saying, Tom?
I don't know, Glory. Where did I hear about princesses, the job of a princess? From growing up. The full job description. How did I learn that? I don't think I was born with that knowledge.
Mom told me. It was all Mom. She was trying to convince me I wouldn't want to be a princess by telling me all the work a princess is obligated to do. And I was like, that sounds great, because it was very administrative.
Yes, the princess keeps the kingdom, and specifically the castle, safe and running.
So this is what I figured out over the years, or I decided as a child, this is what a princess... Okay. Here it is. It's weird. Okay. During a siege, the princess's jobs are to keep the castle running and keep all the supplies that they do have properly distributed, while it's the prince's jobs to sneak out of the castle, because, I mean, if you grew up in the castle, surely you would know all the sneaking in and out hallways, right? So it's prince's job to sneak out of the castle and go on raiding parties to those who are sieging the castle and take supplies back to the castle, as well as to send out for help at other fellow nearby castles. While the princess or princesses keep the castle running, keep the archers all fully stocked with arrows or whatever they're doing, whatever.
Yeah, the king's job is to, take care of the military and make sure everyone's, they don't get taken over. But the princess is the one actually running the...
Yes, going and checking all the people living now in the castle, because, the villagers would have come into the castle for safety. And so keeping everybody fed, making sure all the resources are being distributed, and meanwhile running interference while the princes are literally sneaking out and raiding those who are sieging, as well as sending out for help to nearby other castles and properties to get more assistance. That was what I decided as a child the job of princes and princesses were. CB says Queen Elizabeth II was homeschooled inside Buckingham Palace. Then on, I think it was VE Day or something, she and her sister sneaked out and celebrated with the commoners. Yes. Do you even live there if you don't know how to sneak out proper?
Let's not forget, she was a, what do you call it?
She was an ambulance driver.
Yeah.
During World War II. And she actually was more than just an ambulance driver. She was also an ambulance mechanic. And that was her real skill, apparently, was fixing and repairing engines and, all
Which
the
is why,
tools.
my favorite story is of her will always be when the Saudi royal visited. And, she knew about, the whole women are allowed to drive in Saudi. So she got him to she got them to load him in the car first, and then she got in the driver's seat. And apparently proceeded to do some hairpin turns.
Yep, she took him on a tour of the properties.
At high speed.
Yes, good for her. But that was what I had decided when my mother was trying to talk me out of wanting to be a princess. And I was like, you're only threatening me with a good time here, Mom. Because I love administrative work as well.
I can imagine why on your rest and, self-care day, you like to play a resource management game.
I love Townsmen.
Running a kingdom.
You're right. It's all making sense now. Yeah, I'm not a monarchist either, but I am proud of her skills.
That family is all crazy and corrupt, no questions. But like that story is still just like,
I'm proud of her.
As well as it was still pretty cool to hear about her being an ambulance driver and mechanic, and by all accounts, quite good at it.
Yeah, apparently she really liked it, and the thing that made her sad was that she would have to stop. And by the time
that was actually a problem with taking up the queen title.
I have no doubt she would have kicked his butt at whatever game. Absolutely no doubt whatsoever. Also, I know she likes cows, and I too like cows. There's all these pictures of Queen Elizabeth pointing at cows that people have, like personal pictures, as well as paparazzi pictures of Queen Elizabeth II pointing at cows. And you can actually see it in her mouth, like, because there's a lot of videos to it. She's literally going, cows. She just does, like, all of us. Cows. 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 Like, we know, Mom. Cows. But I do it, too. Every time Tom and I are out driving, I'm like, cows. Cows.
Those look delicious.
Cows. Cows.
Hey, look, coloring book is still around.
So, anyhow. So, do you have anything more you wanted to moo-moos? Moo cow. I knew someone who called it moo cow. Or The Maiden and the Princess. Was there anything more before we move forward to the Star of Eros? Because the Star of Eros is one that is a bit more complicated.
Yes, it's like, we'll in that last one. But the other part that I notice writers don't think about as much, or how to translate, that I loved in The Maiden and the Princess in the visuals, is how each place is very distinct. Even the clothing is distinct. Like in Hammond's world of the narrators, everyone dresses in these beautiful, gray, shining, I forget what you call that cloth. Satin.
Sure.
Robes that when she gets transported there, she too is now dressed in these same gray robes.
But like little girl says.
And then, when they're in the fairy tale kingdom, everything's very pastel, versus the real world that is a bit
more solids and primary colors.
And a bit dingy. Like I was waiting for the London fog. I was waiting for London fog to roll in. And that there's something to be said, even in our stories, for making the different worlds and environments distinct in how we describe them and how we reference them. And sometimes even like how we actually write it.
So one of the things that I recommend for that is actually in your world building. And that is where it can be useful to draw, for instance, the sky or a landscape or a skyline for each world. So the world that I would draw for Emmy's school real world would be far more of these buildings in the skyline and more grayish skies, versus the fairy tale world would have, beautiful blue skies and fluffy white clouds and trees and so on.
And flowers. Lots of pretty flowers.
Which, of course, you can include in your world building along with your floor plans, for instance. And you can either honestly include it, like at the top, for instance, or at the bottom, or on another page. But it's something that I have done in the past where I'll have a floor plan for a house, and then up at just the top, as if you would washi tape, just a very small, like the skyline, just to remind me this is an urban setting, for instance, or this is a countryside. It is something that you can do just to remind yourself, and that is really what we're doing with world building, is we're really just trying to remind ourselves so that we're describing it correctly and consistently being the very important word here.
And even I've seen in a few where like they would change their font styles to let you know what world you're in, so you don't get confused of, wait a minute, if you're reading this, wait, which place are they in right now? What are their concerns? Because these are 3 different worlds. They have different rules. They work different ways.
Yeah, the world of Hammond's world is truly what I would call brutalist style. It's a particular kind of architectural style. And if you look up brutalist, you will now immediately recognize brutalist style architecture. It's very 60s and on modern. It's a lot of concrete. And it is rather foreboding. It is not a welcoming kind of architecture.
No, it is. It's architecture to survive a bombing.
Yeah.
It is, when the tanks come, they won't have an easy way to attack you inside the building, is really what brutalist architecture says to me.
It's steel, glass, and concrete. It always looks cold, even when it's not, even when it's super hot. And it's foreboding. I never feel welcome when I look at a building like that. I don't feel like they want me to come into it. And that is, and also Hammond's world has more Dutch angles. And again, where it feels a little wonky, it feels a little uncanny. It feels just a little bit off, a little bit almost nauseous, but not actually nauseous, where something doesn't feel right. That is the point of Dutch angles a lot of the time. And that is the point of brutalist style. If you look up the history of it, it's fascinating. There are many documentaries. Joe versus the volcano architecture.
You remember the beginning of the movie? 16 tons, and what do you get?
Another day older and deeper in debt. St. Peter, don't you call me, 'cause I can't come. I owe my soul to the company store. Yeah. So, when we come back, we are going to talk about the Star of Eros, or as Tom's theory, a failed Disney script. We hope you all will join us, continue to join us. And again, I'd like to mention, do you have something to drink? Is now a good time to check your bladder? How about a little walk around? We will see y'all in approximately 10 minutes. Beep beep. Beep beep beep. Beep 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 beep. Boom. Well, well, well. I cannot unmute you. Hello, Eva.
The best way to make pancakes overnight.
Yep.
So, the Star of Eros. Do y'all remember watching Disney's Cinderella?
Which
and
one?
There's a scene.
Which one? I think they've made multiple ones. No.
The original Cinderella.
Okay.
And there's a scene where, all the mice and all of her little friends have gotten together and they've made her this lovely dress. And then the two stepsisters see the dress and just
fly into a rage.
Just keep that in mind for the next hour. So, talking about the Star of Eros, why don't you tell them the story?
Why do you say that?
Because there's so many problems with this story.
Okay.
You know how much we love the first two?
I don't hate the Star of Eros.
I don't hate it either. I just mean there's so many problems. Like, we will be grabbing it. There's just so much. As well as, like, some of the problems with Disney stories. Like, as well come up in this.
All right. Well, part of this actually gets a little confusing because they tell it with flashbacks. So it's not like an easy timeline, for one. And but essentially this family, including the mother and the grandmother, used to go out camping sometimes out into the desert. And when the mother was already ill, she made her daughter promise that in 10 years, when this comet would come by, the Star of Eros, that the little girl would, get her family to come out there to watch the comet, which already putting a lot of responsibility on a child. But nevertheless, and the daughter took this very seriously. And so here we are. We fast forward to the comet is going to be passing through very quickly. Now the mother has passed away. The grandmother, the mother's mother, is in an assisted living home. And the father and the brother have all drifted away. So they're not what we would call a cohesive family anymore by any stretch.
They barely talk to each other.
So, I just saw there's a whole bunch going on in the chat that I suddenly was like, what happened? Wait, what are we? Okay. But anyway, yes, that sounds problematic. So anyhow, so now the comet is about to pass, and this now, I assume, late teens, early 20s woman is trying to get her whole family to go out to the desert to watch the passing of this comet, when the grandmother is obviously not really physically or mentally up for this.
She's definitely got dementia.
Yes, the father has had a restraining order placed on his daughter to keep his daughter away from the grandmother, because this is not the first time this daughter the daughter has tried to kidnap the grandmother from the assisted living home. And so fast forward to essentially the main plot of the story, where, and we're not really shown necessarily how she's accomplished these, but she like physically kidnaps and hogties her father and her brother and then kidnaps her grandmother from an assisted living home, which involves an entire altercation with assisted living healthcare staff and security who are already familiar with this young woman and the restraining order, all to get them all out there to watch a comet pass. There is a really cute robot, though.
I would say she's aided and abetted by her little robotic best friend who can shoot literal lightning bolts at people.
Yes, she has made the young woman has made a robot, which her mother had encouraged her to learn how to make robots, has made this a really super adorable little robot.
Bravo to the puppeteers.
Bravo to the puppeteers. And this robot can shoot lasers. So, offensive weaponry. And yes, grandma napping. Problem. And I don't remember off the top of my head. Does anything magical happen when they actually see this comet, or is it just
the flowers?
The flower. There's special flowers that bloom.
Only when the comet's over.
And I thought there would be more. Years. I thought there would be more to it, like that the mother was like part alien, and that is like like it is only this way that she can be resurrected or something, and that never happened. I was kind of disappointed, quite honestly.
Like, no, what we eventually find out in flashback is that she was worried that sort of what did happen happened. Of her husband would drift away from the rest of the family after her passing, not able to cope with her death, and would just see the kids as reminders of her. And that's kind of what we see happened.
Yeah.
And so this was to kind of try to, at least bring them back momentarily, see maybe if they could restore the family.
When we are talking about, so this is what I did want to talk about, and this is why I did include this story in these recommended to watch. As I said, sure, this story has some issues, some problems, both moral and storytelling wise. However, I think it is important to include, and here's why. So both The Maiden and the Princess and Summon a Fiend are storylines. And what I mean by storylines is the main character or characters change from the start of the story to the end. We see a change in their personality or their approach to problems. We see the evolution of their character. But in a plot line, the main character does not change necessarily at all. They are the same character at the start as they are at the end. And this story more clearly shows what a plot line can do.
Oh, yeah.
Particularly when we're talking about a kids or family story. And this one I really see is more aimed at family. This really did remind us of 80s and 90s Disney family films.
Mm-hmm.
There's a plot. There are several beats in this as the adventure moves forward to the culminating point. There's several conflicts they must avoid, such as security guards, the police. So, just to keep that in mind, we really felt like among the stories we could find that were aimed more at family watching or children, this one very clearly showed a plot versus a storyline. And we wanted to show that as an option. So again, how you can craft a short story aimed at families or children. Yes. I thought it would be really cool. Look, I've already made my own headcanon for this story. So, but nevertheless, you can follow the beats of the story. So you can make it, you can make the issues in this story different. And maybe avoid kidnapping. I'm just throwing that out there. I don't know. Maybe you want to do kidnapping. Go, try it out. But follow these beats to practice writing an outline where the character is pretty much the same at the start of it, because since these the parts where the main character is a child, are only shown in flashbacks, really it's just over a 3 or 4 day period, the whole story.
Yeah, if that.
It's just maybe 2 days.
Yeah.
There's a lot of duct tape involved. It's so we really don't see any change in the main character from the start to the end of the main story. And then we do see flashbacks. But as far as what the character was, how she is at the very beginning of this, where I guess she hatches a plan to kidnap her entire family and load them into a very small vehicle.
An El Camino, Glory. It's an El Camino.
But it's one of those that has like a partial back.
Yeah, that's what an El Camino is.
Oh, I thought that there were some El Caminos that were like 2 doors. Anyway.
But yeah,
well, I mean, like,
it's a car that has a little truck in the back, like, but it's on a car frame.
So teeny tiny. I like watching this. I was just impressed they were able to fit 2 men in the back of this truck bed.
They were kind of scrunched up. If you actually look carefully, they were diagonal and they were scrunched in.
Really scrunched in there, and they covered with a tarp. But nevertheless, to see like truly a classic kind of Disney-esque style adventure, family adventure story, like what is it? Something Wicked This Way Comes and Escape to Witch Mountain, the original one in particular. Betty Davis. What a queen. So, but has that in a shorter plot. So again, you can practice more of an adventure story in 5,000 words or less. Because I've heard so many people tell me, oh, it's impossible to write an adventure story in 5,000 words or less. And I'm like, I'm sorry, what? You can write an adventure story in 1,000 words or less. I'm just throwing that out there. So controversial, yet so brave. So anyhow, so this is another one that I really wanted to show how you can follow the beats of this plot to the end. And it is a family-aimed story. You know, it's meant for like a general audiences or all audiences. Megan says, I love the books and the original movies of Escape to Witch Mountain. Yes. Like, I remember how exciting it was that there were essentially adventure films or adventure stories for children. Because most kids' stories are used to be, back in the day, very static. Very much they never left their neighborhood.
Yeah, versus like Cloak and Dagger really stood out in the 80s because it was one of the few real, adventure thriller type story.
I mean, I'm not going to say how many times I've watched Cloak and Dagger, but probably a lot more than most of y'all are thinking. I absolutely loved an espionage, Cold War espionage story, good night, that is aimed at kids. I love the idea of a Cold War espionage thriller story with tech in it, a lot of tech, that was aimed at children. And here's the thing, the tech wasn't that far off from what was actually, it turns out, available, although the CIA did lie about it at the time. Surprisingly, it has very accurate tech for the time period, even though the CIA denied that some of that tech existed at the time. But within like 3 to 5 years, all of that tech was publicly acknowledged as existing and publicly available. Most of it was publicly available in the US.
I mean, it did actually turn out later that it was I forget what you call it, but the script for Cloak and Dagger was a rewrite. And that originally it was a movie based on, what's his name? Major Dad. That character in the movie was actually, that was what the movie was written around. Essentially like another.
Oh, you mean the one from Mississippi?
Yeah.
Yeah. Rainey?
Yeah. I remember his
something
first name.
McRainey or Rainey, something, he married Delta Burke. He's married to Delta Burke.
But that was originally, it was supposed to be him, but they rewrote it as a kid's one. And to me, it actually improved it a lot.
I thought so too. Well, that movie has a lot to do with why I really enjoyed playing, what was it, Cybergen Kids?
Yeah.
Where the only people not trackable in this dystopian punk world, cyberpunk world, are children. And so they're like the rats of society. They can just go, hiding through walls and alleyways undetected since they don't have any tech on them. They're the only ones that don't have tech implants. And Cloak and Dagger is why I was primed to enjoy the Cybergen Kids RPG stories, and why I really enjoyed DMing and creating stories in the Cybergen Kids stuff, was because of Cloak and Dagger, specifically Cloak and Dagger, because here are really one kid and his friend and various tech adults and old Cold War spies that they are trying to elude, but also help the, I don't know, freedom, America. All that Cold War stuff is really confusing now. So that was like, it was a really big deal to me as a kid watching that, and I loved it. And honestly, I think it also led to my love of some of the Choose Your Own Adventure novels and the many spin-offs of Choose Your Own Adventure concept, any of them that were that sort of tech and espionage style. Because let's be honest, when we're talking about espionage, people do not look at children like they exist in such a sophisticated world where you have espionage and double spies and counter spy and all this. People do not look at children as if they could be involved in it. And especially back in the 80s, they really didn't. Still now, they don't really, other than maybe just taking their tech. Like, assuming maybe it's been implanted, say, in a kid's smartphone. But they still don't assume children would be involved in, counter espionage efforts. And I love that concept of a plot where people are not expecting major players to be players. So I guess that's why I like Star of Eros, is nobody's expecting this really tiny robot to have so many. I mean, it is an AI Swiss Army knife. It's got all sorts of tech on it.
It's got a little spinning saw blade.
It's pretty impressive. So it's a lot of fun, and I think children would also enjoy that. So having that sort of a tech character that the general audience in the story, like say other restaurant goers and security at the assisted living home, do not necessarily, it doesn't ring any bells for them. They just think it's a toy. It looks like a toy. So they ignore it since they think it's just one of those little robot toys. And in fact, it is not a toy. It is AI, and it can think on its own, and it also can take instructions. So that was what I thought was really one of the better selling points for this story. That as well would appeal to more family audiences. So in this one, it is both having a plot of very much the clock is ticking. Again, we're back to this clock is ticking trope in order to push the story forward. And we're not expecting any of the characters to have much in the way of character growth or character change. So it's definitely a plot line rather than a storyline. And then we've got at least one character that looks like a toy but is not a toy, that is also helping push this plot forward and to meet its final goal of getting all these people out into the desert to watch this comet pass.
And in that sense, yeah, it's a great adventure story. The problem is some of the means and methods. It definitely has, as I said, like it reminds me of those 80s and 90s movies where it's an ends justify the means story. And that is the tricky part about it. Is, she's not even questionably, she is unquestionably kidnapping these people.
I mean, forcibly abducting them.
Yeah.
It is straight up assault.
And also, she, there's a scene where she disables a police car with a large electrical discharge while the police officers are in the car, as a way to stop them. I mean, thankfully, this is a children's movie, so all that happens to the police is, some frazzled hair and a little bit of comedy.
Which was funny, but that also did remind me of like those Disney action adventure movies of the 70s and 80s where Bandit got away again. Just that.
As long as it's funny, there's no repercussions.
There's no consequences.
Which, is truly a questionable lesson to be teaching kids.
But nevertheless, as I said, the major idea of this story and how it moves through is a very well defined and easy to follow. It does work as a story.
Yes.
I mean, personally, if like trying to copy the beats of this, I would merely have more discussion about what are the consequences.
And maybe a little bit more conversation skills for her to sort of connive and convince.
Yes.
And trick them.
Rather than maybe involving the actual police car and
actual, truly assaulting people.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
I mean, and they do show, like in the story, the only reason she really gets away with the police is because the younger officer is a childhood friend of hers.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's how we can believe that, no, these police officers are not going to fully press charges for all the laws she has broken. And she's broken a lot.
Mm-hmm.
But the other part is where the payoff, though, isn't that high. And that's the other problem, is like for an adventure story and all of this effort.
All this risk.
So much risk, so much law breaking, truly against everyone else's will. And for what? Well, I fulfilled my promise.
Yeah, versus said, like, I thought we were going to get a big payoff, like that her mom is actually part alien. That like maybe her mom's father was an alien, and that this is how the aliens like can resurrect themselves, is only when this comet passes through, and that the mom had left like a little part of her soul in the flowers, and since they only bloom when the comet passes, she could then be resurrected, but the family needed to be there in order to witness it, or they would never have accepted the mother's return. Like I thought that was what the ending actually was going to be.
But something
the mother would be back.
But something that would be proportional to the adventure story. Like if this is one of those ones where you do have a mismatched path versus ending.
Yeah, like so in Cloak and Dagger, the stakes were quite high, like in this film, The Star of Eros. The stakes were very high, but the payoff is American freedom. So we accept these high stakes and the risk, life and death. It's Cloak and Dagger. We accept the risk because American freedom. Which, it's just going to affect 300 plus million people. Yes, of course. Let's see, Spence says, I'm still hung up on why was she trying to kidnap grandma from the assisted living facility before this. Yes.
Again, not well developed. There's definitely it really felt like this script could have been workshopped a couple more rounds. But versus Cloak and Dagger, where the Russians are trying to get plans for American stuff so they could disable all the American defenses.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's why there's big stakes. And so while the adventure is appropriate.
Yes, the risk is appropriate to the payoff. So that is the only thing, like we that is what we wanted to talk about the Star of Eros, and so that you could watch it with a critical eye. Of the beats do work. but the setup and the payoff are inadequate. So I wanted you to see this with a critical eye of how could you do this better. So if you'd like to try this exercise now or another time, this is the exercise I suggest. First off, go ahead, watch it, and then write out the plot outline. So you want to write the beats, just so you basically have an idea. And then you want to look at it with a critical eye and figure out how could you write this better. So it doesn't have to be a comet. It does not have to be grandma in an assisted living facility. And we do not even have to kill off a mother. Hello to mama. But simply, you need to be able to, you need to have the elements that make this set of beats work is you need to have running out the clock. So there has to be a time crunch that is moving the plot forward. And that is where the sense of urgency is coming from. Hence, the comet, catching the comet does work. So as I said, you could do that, or you could have another reason the clock is running. And then, why do the people need to therefore be at the end? Why do they need to be at the culmination? It could be anything. It could be that the young people, maybe they don't even know they're aliens, and this is when the mothership comes back, as in the form of a comet, and it picks up anybody who had gotten a ride before, picks you up, and you get to go back to your real people. I don't know.
And at this specific location, like this is the landing location. That's why, because they say like you have to get to this location by this night. Again, indicating that time crunch, that there is a payoff, and it's like.
Spence says, I would rewrite that to have grandma being all about the plan and hate the assisted living lifestyle, and granddaughter getting busted joyriding grandma to lift her spirits or something. I agree. And it really, like, they could have literally put that in, other than it was already getting a little long. Like 25 minutes is kind of long for a short film. But nevertheless, it still could have worked. But yeah, of like, what is the payoff that we have a time crunch for? And that, so all the conflicts are worth the effort to get to the final culmination point. So that is what I would suggest watching this film. You can watch it the first time just to enjoy it, but then look at it with a critical eye of how would you write this different, and then sketch that out. Because not to say like it's bad, look, even when we have stories we like, still look at it with a critical eye and think, is there anything I would have different? Is there anything I would have done a little differently? Or that maybe would have felt more logical or made more sense to me? Sketch out that outline. It's a very good exercise for writers to do this. And that is why I'm suggesting it, especially for those who maybe you enjoy those kind of childhood or family stories, action adventure stories, such as Escape to Witch Mountain and Something Wicked This Way Comes, and Cloak and Dagger. Of if you enjoyed those kind of action adventure stories, then you would probably enjoy writing them, especially in short story form where it's not as much of a time and energy commitment for you. But it says, which would be a good way to show how far the rest of the family has drifted apart because dad/brother didn't even notice grandma wasn't happy. Exactly. They have sort of a conversation about this in the story where the young woman is insisting grandma's unhappy, and the father's like, I cannot take care of her. She has to be in the home. But essentially some things have come to more of a head that they don't exactly talk about. And here's what I propose, that anybody who's interested in this exercise, you probably could do better. I would love to read your version of even an outline where you try to address the things that sort of are glaringly obvious to you of how to resolve these so that they're not quite so plot holey. Because a bunch of this comes off as plot holes. And probably the writer originally felt like, oh, but it's so limited, it's so short, I can't really go into all these explanations. And that is why we just look at how could we do it better? How could we do it different? How could we do it in our way that makes sense to us? Or maybe you're going to do the whole outline, do all the beats, try to figure out your own way and go, nope, there's no way to do it better. Still, the exercise is good for you as a writer. So again, we wanted to propose this as another writing exercise if you are interested in this and practicing this, because I just feel like children and families just need so many more good action adventure stories. And the only way to get it is for everybody to start practicing. Oh, yes, I meant to go check that. I noticed that yesterday on someone else's live stream, and I was wondering if that was an option.
Yeah, it's like they're giving, it's like from TikTok.
I don't have that option, but y'all do. I'm looking on my browser. I'm logged in as Glory Race the Blues, and it does. I don't see where I have a clip option.
Yeah, no, it's TikTok. It's so you can reuse it to do for your own stuff to sort of rework with.
So y'all have this option. You can clip anything you want in the show. I cannot. So if you clip it, does that give you a link? And you can post the link if it gives you a link. And if you do have a link and you have access to our Discord, we'd love for you to post a link there so that we can share those later. Spence says, and it would have been super easy. Grandma willingly getting in the car or high fives her. And when they reference her kidnapping grandma and someone just goes, it was just an ice cream date. Yes. Spence has it. I also had to refresh at some point. Okay. So yeah, if y'all would like to explore clipping, let us know. We would definitely be curious to see. It looked really cool. I think it lets you do up to 3 to 5 minute clips or something like that. At least that's what I noticed yesterday when I was watching a different live stream. So that is the exercise I'm proposing is first, since with short stories, it's so much easier to write out the beats because there's less of it. It's just, this is it. And when you write a beat, you are essentially writing a basic, what is the scene and what is the most basic explanation of what happens.
Summarize it.
Like, we're talking maybe 1 to 2 sentences tops per scene. With these shorts, every scene is a different beat because it pivots or moves the story forward. With movies and longer stories like TV shows, every scene is not necessarily a beat. But with these shorts, they're trying to progress through the story so quickly that pretty much almost every single scene is a beat. That's the difference. I just wanted to make that abundantly clear so people are not thinking they have to write out every scene like if they want to do it for a movie. It is not necessarily that way in a movie since it's long form. It's just whenever the plot is moving forward, that's a beat.
And also, it'll give you a good sense of, since these are the main beats, if you want to later on, you can then go back and add in additional scenes, for what you feel like might be missing from the story, and see what it's like to go from a short story to a novella or novel length.
Mm-hmm.
By filling in addition that, like, you don't have to have everything in sequence already figured out at the beginning of your story. You could just have, like, here's the beginning, here's the end, and here's the main beats that happen so that you kind of figure out how the story will go. And then you work on what else needs to be in here.
Also, another way to just literally pad a story is to put in a B plot. You just maybe, so the equivalent in Star of Eris would be like grandma's storyline or the brother. What has the brother been up to? Or, even the father, or where has the mother been this whole time? If, that equivalent of you putting in a secondary plot line and how it's affecting someone, what's going on. And that literally will just add in extra padding.
I mean, to give you a true case in point of when you really need it, Smokey and the Bandit.
Mm-hmm.
Technically, the A plot for Smokey and the Bandit is, a beer run.
Yeah, Coors beer.
The South.
From what, Colorado to Tennessee or Georgia or something?
Yeah, to Georgia.
Yeah, that's the A plot, and it is bare bones.
It's 20 minutes of story, maybe 25.
There's a B plot and there's a C plot, if I remember correctly, because it's been probably a year since I've watched that. And those are the more interesting plots going on. So there's a romance. And then the C plot, I believe, is whatever's going on with the sheriff, Jackie Gleason.
Well, the sheriff's son is the one she's running from.
Mm-hmm.
That's who she was engaged to.
Yes.
And so the sheriff's like, get back here. And then also the sheriff sees the laws being broken, and he is determined to also now catch this guy at the same time, at first, for multiple reasons.
Yes. So there's several plots going on. Alone, none of these plots are really worth watching a movie. Like Smokey and the Bandit is what I'm talking about. But together, interwoven, these 3 plot lines actually make it a lot of fun to watch as they keep intertwining and diverging and intertwining again. So, but that's what I like about the short story format is, so first let's do it as simple as possible so you get really good at doing a plot. Get that done. And then once you feel confident with a couple of these, then you can start practicing. You got your strong A plot, and then you've got a B plot that you are now starting to interweave through the A plot to give it a little bit of extra flavor, to kind of pivot it around so that in the boring sections, because let's be honest, even in an action adventure, there's some parts where you're just driving. That's boring. Like driving is, driving even for real life can be boring, especially through the desert. Not that it's always boring, but hours and hours and hours of driving. Sometimes people are just quiet when they're driving. So that's when you bring in another plot to interweave through for a moment to give the story a feel like there's always things happening, even though it's happening to different plot lines.
And that's what we saw in that first one we were talking about, Maiden and the Princess.
Is there's 2 plots. Well, 2 storylines, really.
And neither storyline is really that interesting on its own.
Yeah.
There's definitely some feels in them, but neither of them's like, oh, I want to watch the story. I want to watch it again. Yeah, but you combine them.
There's not a lot happening. Both of these stories are pretty straightforward. Emmy is trying out something new, and it went over like a lead balloon. Hammond doesn't like sticking to the script. He has his reasons, but he's not, he doesn't feel like he needs to stick to it. And his supervisors vehemently disagree. These stories are okay, but together, when we put both of their stories together and we see how they intersect with each other, that's where it gets really interesting. Essentially, you have Emmy and Hammond interacting with each other and being heroes for each other, and then both learning to be more heroic in their own life for themselves. That is what is compelling to the viewer, to the audience. So, but again, we're going to just practice writing out the beats of these short films so you get good at it, and then writing your own versions again, so you're practicing doing the same kind of simple, straightforward beats, so that then once you're good at it, you can then start interweaving secondary and even tertiary beat lines.
Because even in Star of Eros, the B plot is the cops are trying to stop her.
Mm-hmm.
That's the B plot, because we've already got a ticking clock. This has an ending that's you have to get to by a certain time. So the cops chasing is now actually a B plot.
Mm-hmm.
And why are they pursuing her? What is their relations to her? All of that does add additional parts and interest into the story.
Mm-hmm.
But it's not actually part of the original main plot. And so again, practicing and seeing how you would change these plots and
Mm-hmm.
each beat, and where, do you need that beat in there at this point, or do you want to move it somewhere else?
Mm-hmm.
And seeing how your version of a story like this would turn out.
Mm-hmm.
Because again, all 3 of these shorts are really good on their beats.
Yes, they have very strong beats, and that's really what we wanted you to see. is they're strong, straightforward beats. They're easy to follow, partly because they're intended for a younger audience, for children, and children are easy to distract anyway. So things have to be more straightforward. But it's also great for everyone writer-wise to practice. Again, because they're so straightforward, so easy to follow. Even if you're not interested in always writing for children or family audiences, don't worry about that. It's just that these are so simple and straightforward to follow. That is why we're encouraging everybody, no matter what kind of stories you want to write.
And they're engaging stories without requiring a lot of novelty to it. You know, what does Hazel need? Hazel needs a friend.
Something
How
everybody
does she
can
get
relate
it?
to.
By having a little bit of self-confidence and just saying hello and introducing herself.
Mm-hmm.
But, you know, the story is, how did she get there? Because she didn't have that at the time.
Mm-hmm.
You know, Emma's as well, of like, you know, she wants to like who she likes and she wants to express that without, you know,
being
feeling
shamed.
ashamed. Yeah.
Or being told it's unacceptable.
And, you know, not feeling like she has any backup either.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, again, these are not complex plots. There's not major surprise in them, but they're still engaging. They're still good stories. They're ones, you know, you don't mind hearing again. I do not mind watching these shorts several times.
Because we have watched them several times.
Because they're all really cute and adorable and interesting, and, you know, yeah, it's good acting. All of them do have good acting.
Good casting.
Good casting.
Mm-hmm.
Of, you know, so again, it shows you here's what a good version of this product looks like. You know, don't feel so intimidated.
Mm-hmm.
It's not that they're so, you know, they're spectacular. And I don't have a writer's voice like that. It's very easy to write in these voices,
Mm-hmm.
in these styles. And again, that's what we liked about it, was they're approachable.
They're very approachable. And they're not complex. So we felt that also they would be easy for any, you know, writer to sketch out the plot line and then write their own version. That it wouldn't be complicated or too nuanced. Because when you're just getting started, you don't need it complicated. You can add your own complications. All humans are good at complicating any matter themselves. They don't need help. I've never met a human that had difficulty complicating a situation themselves. Not a single human, storyteller or otherwise. Never known a single human that was good at simplifying a problem. Not a one.
And yeah, like, you don't need to take, you know, don't overwhelm yourself. Take what may seem to you like, oh, well, this is easy, I'm not gonna learn anything. The practice is what really learns you and trains you.
The more you practice this, the better you'll get at it, which means the better you'll get at sketching out your own outlines really fast.
Because they also show you how to think about it. Like, how does one beat lead to the next? That is very important in storytelling. So your reader does not get lost. That's the real point of the beats, is how to take from one section to the next part of the story and your reader to go, oh, okay, yeah, of course, that's what happens next. It, you know, follows from this. Yeah, that makes, I gotcha.
Mm-hmm.
Because you're taking them on a story, on an adventure, even if it's not, you know, an adventure story, it's still an adventure.
Uh-huh.
I mean, who doesn't want to watch, you know, little Hazel get a friend?
How about who doesn't want to watch Hazel argue down a demon?
Oh, yeah.
And win?
Yeah.
And make him feel bad for making her feel bad? And he's like, oh, pet. She fierce.
Mm-hmm.
I love her. I love her as a character. I wish she'd be in more things as this character. Like, it's truly, I want to see where Hazel goes with this.
You know, a small child necromancer.
Yes.
There's a different kind of story plot.
There's a very different, but I am still here for it. I am very curious. Like, go on, little girl, necromancer. Where are you going with this? Ditto with Hammond. I was very curious of like, where does Hammond go with this? What happens in Hammond's story? And does Hammond and Emmy continue to interact? Do they stay friends or what happens? I was very curious about that. Honestly, I was curious to the Star of Eros of how this family settles afterwards. Like, does everyone just go visit her in jail? What was happening?
Well, I mean, we do see at the end her eating food with, her family and the cops.
Again, there's too many things left unsaid that I'm very curious, but I'm sure everybody as a writer could like insert whatever they think.
I mean, I kind of got the sense that at least the actors were playing it of the young police officer who is the son of the older police officer. That's not weird.
As well as some,
is, was not only just a childhood friend, but had a childhood crush on the main character in Star of Eros. And that's how she was going to get off from this, is like, he still kind of wants to date her.
So kind of sociopathically manipulative.
Yeah. You said there were some problems.
I did. I said there were some issues. I would love to see writers address those and how they address them.
I mean, just like romance of, let's clean up a lot of these really bad tropes that are problematic and are very bad life skills.
And again, like, why do we have to keep killing off moms for these young people to have adventures? Not necessary. Just saying, it's not necessary. You also don't have to be a bad mom or make a bad choice for children to have adventures. But if nobody practices this, how will we as writers ever get better at not killing off the moms or making them not good moms?
So do we have anything else, or should we talk about what's coming up next week, Lori?
Okay. Yes. Like, what a great question. What is coming up next week?
It's movies of some kind.
Okay. Okay. Next week is the influence of B movies, specifically Barbarella, Flash Gordon, and Ice Pirates. Whoo, baby. Talk about some B movies. Fun fact, Brian Blessed plays a fantastic but small role in Flash Gordon. Also, be warned, these movies are old and they are all problematic. I just want you to know that. Please do not go in expecting
woke,
healthy.
Oh yeah, there's nothing healthy
about anybody. There is sexism. There is indubitably racism. There is problematic so many things. So I just want you to be aware the 60s, 70s, and 80s films were definitely problematic, particularly B films. So yes, Barbarella, Flash Gordon, and Ice Pirates. Oh, honey.
I mean, Flash Gordon though did get Queen music. Like,
yes,
it is Queen.
Like, okay, full disclosure, these movies, when I say the influence of B movies, okay, if I'm really brutally honest, a lot of it has to do with the influence of me as a child from these films. But more specifically, what I noticed, I loved these movies as a kid. But what I really noticed about these films as I grew up, as I grew older, and through through adulthood, was I kept seeing echoes and references in other stories, books, and films to these B movie films.
You would never guess which movies have references to Barbarella.
Hello, Nia.
Like this influenced a lot more people than you'd guess.
Yes. So that is what we want to talk about, is the influence these, like all B movies, but in particular, specifically these 3 B movies have had, not just on future B films, but like so many stories, and not just films, also books, graphic novels. Flash Gordon originally got its start either in comic strips or in actual comics, like comic books. I don't remember.
It was a comic strip. It was a newspaper comic strip originally.
I thought Barbarella was originally a sci-fi book.
Yes, I think it was French.
Or Italian. I don't know.
I thought it was part of what was that movie in 1984 came out, cartoon, but for adults. Heavy Metal. I believe it was originally in Heavy Metal.
Oh, these are really great questions. Based on the French comic series of the same name by Jean-Claude Forest. Barbarella is also based on a comic book series. Yeah. And Ice Pirates is like a fever dream.
It's just a fever dream. You know, Bruce Valanche tried his best to punch it up, but it's sort of a Battlestar ripoff. It's a Battlestar Galactica universe without the Cylons. Instead, they just don't have a lot of water. So it's a combination of a lot of what was popular at the time. So it's, Battlestar meets Dune,
It was based on a script by Stanford Sherman, writer of Krull.
And if you've seen Krull, just think of if Krull was a comedy.
It's comic science fiction.
Yeah.
So that is what I noticed growing up and through adulthood is echoes of these 3 very influential B movies keep showing up, and not just in other B movies and not just in comic books or in science fiction, for instance, even though all of these 3 are science fiction. Like these are specifically sci-fi B movies, because for a long time, most science fiction was B movie-esque because the budget would have to be so big to make a proper science fiction film. So Star Wars was a really big deal because it showed you could have an A film be science fiction and succeed and make its money back and more. That was like the really big deal about Star Wars, was it showed, oh, look, you can have an A movie sci-fi and it actually make a profit. And now we're sort of in the age of A movie sci-fi, because most of the Marvel films are really almost strictly science fiction, although many people have made arguments about the science fiction is now going over to fantasy, which I'm not going to disagree with and I'm not going to argue.
I mean, it's sci-fi, it's science fantasy.
Magic. But nevertheless, but these 3 films, and it's not like only these 3 films, but I really want to talk about how B movies, influence culture, and not just say American culture or European culture, but really worldwide culture. Because I've heard many writers for many decades now talk about B movies and science fiction stories and science fiction films as being lowbrow and not worth their time in trying to write, even though many a writer has had really cool, awesome science fiction story ideas. But when I'm like, well, that sounds great, why don't you write it? They're like, oh, but it's so trashy. Or it's really, at best, it would be a B film or a B story. It's not like, good. And I'm like, okay, my perspective is this. Why are you writing? Are you writing so that your story lives on beyond you? Because if you are writing to have your stories live on beyond your natural life, then don't worry about what is lowbrow or trash, because humans love lowbrow and trash. And they will keep talking about these stories forever. There are so many stories that are still living on, like, for instance, Baron von Munchausen. Do you know how old that story is? Hundreds of years old. Okay. There are stories that are already hundreds of years old that we are still retelling again and again. And I'm not just talking about Pinocchio,
or Cyrano.
I'm not just talking about these kind of things, although Cyrano's not quite that old, but you know what I'm saying. But when it's a good idea, when it's a memorable concept, don't worry about, oh, this is a B movie or it's kind of cheesy or corny. That is not what to worry about, because wouldn't it be cool if your story was remembered again and again in other people's stories and they kept referencing it or giving little homages, and people like those homages and they're like, what was that homage to? And then they find out, oh, it's to your story. So then they have to go find your story and read it, and they love it. They tell everyone else about it.
I mean, if you want to talk about fourth wall breaking, the people don't talk about much anymore, but they used to. The sequel to Don Quixote is actually a fourth wall break story of where Don Quixote is the writer of Don Quixote, except no one believes he is the writer of Don Quixote. And it's an entirely different kind of insane story plot. But yeah, like, no, there's all these, like, they talk about it though, because it's like, wait, I got to tell you about, like, you're gonna have to read this, but I'll tell you roughly the storyline just to get you interested type. This thing's insane, but you want to follow this trip.
One of the things I really like about science fiction, particularly what's seen as B kind of stories, and I'm not saying B movie, because you also see it in like B short stories in the old sci-fi magazines, as well as the B books, pulp books. This is where people get an idea for technology, and then people who have the ability to work on that technology are like, yeah, that would be a great idea. It had never occurred to them before. But here is a writer who like essentially used this technology in a story. And it was so inspiring that people keep going out and trying to make that tech a reality. That has happened so many times. Where has it happened, Glory? How about supermarket, grocery store, automatic doors? Okay. Tasers, which I'm not saying it's all good stuff. But even new and improved shoes. Apparently, like, all sorts of governments paid attention to all the things you could hide in shoes. And that was like a big part of the Cold War. But all of those things all predate in fiction first.
James Bond tech, period.
All of that did not exist before he wrote it out. And then there were plenty of people going, that's a great idea. I wonder if I could make that. So that's what I mean about the influence of B movies and B stories, and not just science fiction, but just any kind of, oh, it's kind of cheesy or corny, or it's a little silly, but it's a fun story. And it's got, tech in it or fantasy ideas or whatever it has in there. All of these things inspire people, and they don't stop maybe 5 years after the story came out. It keeps inspiring generations upon generations. And yet, at the time when it came out, it was viewed as lowbrow, or, just a money. It was no big deal. It was just something you did. You wrote this to pay the bills. It's no big deal. And these keep influencing our culture for generations upon generations. So I figured we would point out, by examining these 3 films as an example, of how stories that even at the time they came out, even before they were made into films, were viewed as lowbrow, because believe me, comic books were definitely viewed as lowbrow, and how they just keep inspiring generations after generations of people. People keep rediscovering it. And that this is the effect of writing fun stories, fun stuff, and don't worry about, oh, it's cheap and trashy. I don't know who's coming up with this nonsense, but all it's doing is making people self-censor what they write. So this is one of our love letters to all of you writers, to help, encourage you to write stories that inspire you, that are fun, that are just, pure escapism, and see what you get. And don't worry about it's trash, it's corny, it's cheesy, or whatever chuggy the young people are saying now. Don't worry about that. Don't worry about any of that. Worry about, are you having fun writing it? Is it ridiculous? Do you keep giggling while you write it? Which is a great sign, by the way. That is more likely your readers will also be giggling while they read it and having a wonderful time, and they'll keep talking about it with their friends, and it will inspire them. And you never know what people will be inspired to either write about or design themselves from your stories. Or maybe you don't want any of that pressure and you're like, no, just tell me about the fun and ridiculousness of Barbarella, Flash Gordon, and Ice Pirates. Oh my goodness, we know so much backstory on these 3 stories because we grew up watching these ridiculous movies. They are pure and utter nonsense, and I can't believe our parents let us watch it. In Barbarella, there's an orgasm machine, y'all.
I mean, again, it's sci-fi, and one of the real hallmarks of sci-fi is its philosophy. It is about, well, we'll put it in a situation that is far removed from right now, so we can talk about the problems we have right now and how we would like to see this change. It's like Barbarella is about, gender equality.
Yes.
And the fears.
Using Italian outfits.
And the fears, men have of what if women, have equal power? What will we be then? That's the real story. That's the real question going on in Barbarella.
Barbarella versus toxic masculinity. And it is a wild ride, and it is definitely worth watching at least once. But really, that should be what it should have been called. Barbarella versus toxic masculinity. Spoiler, she kind of mostly wins. Versus Flash Gordon. As long as I try to separate my concept of human Asians from the villainy of Emperor Min and the Yellow Peril, it's more watchable.
Well, I mean, actually, in modern context, you can really watch it as a morality play about colonialism.
Ming part of the Marvel universe?
That's a different Ming.
Oh, see, I get confused.
You're probably thinking of Kang the Conqueror.
Maybe
versus Ming the Merciless.
Ming the Merciless. Now I gotta look this up.
Ming is kind of close to the one who runs the 10 rings. That's Iron Man's thing. But really, though, what you end up with Flash Gordon is, a inverted viewpoint of colonialism from the people who are trying to not be colonized.
Mm-hmm.
That's all it is. It's, white people fearing colonization. Oh, the irony. But that's the story of Flash Gordon.
So it is a wild ride. But again, it does open up a lot of conversations that characters can actually have dialogue between each other about very important philosophy like decolonization. And then there is Ice Pirates, which was originally going to be called, I think, Water Planet or something.
Yeah.
And about privatizing resources.
The dangers of unchecked, capitalism.
Mm-hmm. Water Planet. That was what it was called, the Water Planet. And so, again, these are actually very 21st century conversations that we are having right now, and yet these films and these stories are super duper old.
But it's because, we haven't answered them. We haven't overcome them, so we're still talking about them. It's not that none of the problems of being human in modern times has changed in the last 50 years.
Or 100 for that matter.
It's not that The Simpsons predicted anything.
No. It's that we still are struggling to find solutions. And so, again, what a great way to jump into the conversation. So that's what we're going to talk about next week. We hope you will join us. We are going to now go to our Discord server, Unicorn Council. If anybody would like to join us in voice chat there, we will be in the clubhouse for the rest of the evening. If you'd like to hang out, discuss, give us your commentary, make suggestions for the future, or, just chill, because I'm going to be playing Don't Starve Together. I don't know about the rest of y'all. If anybody needs a link to our Discord server, please let me know now or in the future, and I'll be sure to send you an invite. And with that, we'd like to bid you adieu, and thank you so much for coming. We have had a wonderful time here with you, and thank you so much for hanging out with us. It's lovely to see you. That's why we keep doing it. Bye-bye, everybody.